All right. So, we've all seen the headlines, right? But today, we're going way deeper, looking at all this quarterback craziness going on in the NFL,
Yeah.
specifically with Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and then, of course, the Giants and what they're doing with Jameis Winston.
Right.
We've gone through and looked at a ton of different commentary and opinions and all that, and trying to really get to the heart of what's going on here and understand all the possible domino effects.
Hmm.
And so today's mission really is to distill all that down and get to that crucial knowledge
Yeah.
so that you have a much clearer picture of what's really happening and what it means for the upcoming season.
Yeah, and it's not just about the transactions and the trades or whatever. It's really about the strategy behind it all and also the potential for some unexpected things to happen.
Right.
And ultimately how it could all shake out,
Yeah.
in terms of the actual competition on the field.
Right.
We're here to kind of, connect those dots for you.
Yeah. So let's jump right in with Jameis Winston signing with the New York Giants. Now, you might initially think, well, is he going to be their starter?
Right.
But what we've seen actually suggests maybe a different role entirely.
One thing that's interesting to look at with this is the money.
Yeah.
His contract is structured more like a backup quarterback.
Oh, wow.
It's actually less money than what they've paid backups in the past,
Oh, really?
which is, pretty strong indication that right now they're not looking at him as their starter.
Yeah.
The other thing that this lower contract value might do is give them some flexibility to go after a really high-cost rookie in the draft
Right.
without, significant dead cap tied to their backup.
Right.
So, maybe it's kind of a longer-term strategy there.
Yeah. So it sounds like they're keeping their options open,
Mhm.
maybe looking at adding a veteran or going after a quarterback in the draft.
Right.
You never know.
Yeah, you can never say never in the NFL, but it certainly seems like they're not putting all their eggs in the Jameis Winston basket right away.
Right. And for Winston himself, I mean, this is an interesting new chapter, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He's a veteran quarterback.
Yeah.
I mean, 31 years old.
Yeah.
But, he's had those moments where he's looked really good.
Right.
And I think, going to the Giants is a legitimate chance for him to kind of, reset in a
Right.
new environment.
Yeah. And that new environment in New York
Mm-hmm.
noticeably lacked explosive plays last season.
That's right.
In fact, they were dead last in the league.
Yeah.
How might a quarterback with Winston's arm talent change that dynamic?
Well, he's not afraid to throw the ball down the field.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that could bring a much-needed element of excitement
Yeah.
back to the Giants' offense.
Yeah, they got some interesting receivers, too,
They do.
with Malik Neighbors and Hyatt and Wan'Dale Robinson.
Guys who can really stretch the field.
Right, and I think the big question mark, of course, has always been with Winston,
Yeah.
is can he limit the interceptions?
Exactly. That's the key,
Yeah.
right? If he can be a little bit more careful with those deep throws,
Yeah.
he could be a real asset, even if he's not the starter.
Right.
He can come in certain situations.
Mm.
Maybe, they need a spark or whatever. He could be valuable.
Okay. Let's shift gears now and talk about this huge domino effect that we're seeing.
Oh.
And the biggest domino of all
Mm,
is Aaron Rodgers.
right.
It seems like his decision is holding up a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
particularly when it comes to Russell Wilson.
Well, yeah, and it's a good question. How interconnected are these two things, really?
Right.
And I think the conventional wisdom is that wherever Rodgers ends up will then pave the way for Russell Wilson to find his next spot.
Okay.
And, we know Rodgers had that meeting with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
It was a long one, 6 hours.
6 hours. That's like a full workday.
Yeah, it sounds pretty serious.
Yeah.
But there are some conflicting reports about how much we should read into that meeting.
Right.
I think what the insiders are saying is don't jump to conclusions. Clearly they're interested, right?
Yeah.
6 hours. You don't just,
Yeah.
sit around and, talk about the weather for that long.
Right.
But the people who know Rodgers well say that it's really a personal decision,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to predict.
Right.
They're saying that really nobody knows what he's going to do except for him.
Yeah.
And he may not even have a close circle of people
Oh, wow.
that are really influencing him.
Interesting.
If you look back at his past decisions,
Yeah.
it seems like he very much likes to be in control.
Right.
So that might mean that the Steelers' traditional methods of,
Yeah.
recruiting a player might not work so well with Rodgers.
Right.
They might have to appeal to something,
Yeah.
beyond just, football.
Right. Like lifestyle.
Exactly. Lifestyle, legacy, things like that.
Right.
So it's a very interesting situation.
Yeah. So all the speculation we're hearing about these other teams
Right.
potentially being in the mix Minnesota, the Giants again. It sounds like we should just take all that with a grain of salt right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much uncertainty around what Rodgers is going to do that it's really hard to say how serious any other team is at this point.
Right.
It's kind of like when you're looking at the top free agent in any market
Mm-hmm.
until they sign, everybody else is kind of waiting
Yeah.
because they don't want to commit to their second or third choice and then have the big fish come along.
Right.
So Rodgers' situation is kind of having that same effect
Yeah.
on the quarterback market right now.
Interesting. Now, focusing specifically on the Steelers,
Okay.
it seems like there's a real sense of urgency there
Mm-hmm.
from some folks to land a top quarterback,
Yeah.
whether that's Rodgers or Wilson.
And I can see why. Right. I mean, they're looking to compete.
Yeah.
They're in a tough division.
Yeah.
And letting a guy like Rodgers walk out of your building after a 6-hour meeting without a deal
Right.
could be seen as a bad sign.
Yeah.
Like if he was really their number one choice,
Mm.
wouldn't they have gotten it done right then and there?
Yeah, and they do have some nice pieces on offense.
They do.
I mean, George Pickens is showing some real promise as a receiver.
He's a good young player.
Yeah, and they also have the 21st overall pick in the draft.
Right.
So, they're clearly looking to upgrade from Mason Rudolph,
Yeah, they need to.
who was their primary quarterback last year.
In that division with Cincinnati and Baltimore,
Right?
you got to have a top-tier quarterback to
Yeah.
even have a chance.
Right. And, relying on a rookie quarterback that you draft at number 21,
Yeah.
there's some inherent risk there.
Yeah, you just don't know.
Plus, you never know what can happen with injuries.
Right. I mean, look at Teddy Bridgewater
Yeah.
a few years ago. Unexpected things happen.
So it's risky.
Yeah.
And that brings us to this interesting idea of Aaron Rodgers fatigue.
Right.
And we haven't even seen him play a down for the Steelers yet.
But Cam Hayward,
Right.
a real leader in that locker room. I just kind of alluded to that.
Yeah.
So that might suggest that they're open to other options.
Right.
Like maybe giving Russell Wilson another shot.
Right.
Especially with the receivers they have.
Yeah.
Pickens, and then they drafted Roman Wilson,
Right.
who's supposed to be pretty good.
Yeah.
His performance has been described as kind of like B minus.
Okay.
So, there's still a good quarterback in there.
Yeah.
I mean, you put him in the right situation
Yeah.
with some good receivers,
Right.
he could still be effective.
And it's interesting, with all this uncertainty around Rodgers
Mm-hmm.
and the Steelers' clear need for a quarterback.
Yeah.
We've heard some reports that there is this sentiment in the team to
Right.
to really look at their options. So
Right.
it really does highlight the contrast, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Rodgers is this, future Hall of Famer,
Right.
but there's some questions about how long he wants to play,
Mm-hmm.
especially after his time with the Jets. And then you have Wilson.
A guy who's been really good.
Yeah.
Maybe not at that same level as Rodgers.
Right.
Still a solid player.
All right.
So the Steelers are facing a tough choice.
Yeah.
Do they be patient and wait for Rodgers,
Mm-hmm.
who could be a game changer but is also unpredictable?
Right.
Or do they go after Wilson,
Yeah.
who's more of a sure thing,
Right.
but maybe not quite at that same level?
Okay, so the argument for being patient with Rodgers is that
Yeah.
a guy like him, a quarterback with his resume,
Mm-hmm.
might just need more time to figure things out,
Right?
Yeah,
he's earned that right.
Yeah.
He can take his time.
And the Steelers might be willing to wait,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even until close to the draft.
Which is just about a month away.
Right, in late April.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is
Right.
some people are saying, look,
Yeah.
the Steelers are in a tough spot.
Mm-hmm.
They need to put Rodgers on the clock.
Give him a deadline.
Yeah, exactly.
And if he doesn't, then they can move on to Wilson.
Yeah.
And at least they have somebody.
Because the alternative is
Like-
going into this incredibly competitive AFC North
Oh,
with Mason Rudolph
Yeah.
and a rookie quarterback that they draft at number 21.
Right.
And the quarterbacks who are likely to be available at that spot
Yeah.
might not be ready to start right away.
A guy like Jackson Dart,
Right.
for example, he might be gone well before then.
Yeah, and that really highlights the high stakes for the Steelers.
It does.
I mean, the AFC North is brutal.
It's arguably the toughest division in football.
Yeah.
And to compete in that division, you've got to have a quarterback
Yeah.
that you can rely on.
Yeah.
So to go into the season with that much uncertainty at quarterback
Yeah.
would be a big gamble for them.
Absolutely. And just to kind of take a step back for a second
Right.
and show you the kind of passion that fuels all of this.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that peak inside the Bills fan cave recently.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it just reminds you of how much people loved this sport.
It's amazing.
And even a former player like E.J. Manuel
Right?
was impressed by it.
All that memorabilia.
It was pretty cool. And speaking of that passion
Yeah.
and the excitement around these teams, and especially the quarterback position,
Yeah.
that fan engagement really shows how much these communities are invested in their teams.
Absolutely. And the quarterback is often seen as like the central figure,
Right.
the guy who can lead them to victory.
Right.
So these decisions are really important to the fans.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
it's clear that the quarterback situation in the NFL, particularly with Aaron Rodgers,
Right.
is creating a ton of uncertainty, and it could have some big consequences.
It could.
So what are the key takeaways?
Well, I think, first of all,
Yeah.
Jameis Winston going to the Giants,
Mm-hmm.
it looks like he's going to be a backup.
Right.
But he does have that arm talent that could add something to their offense.
Right.
Then you have the Steelers,
Yeah.
who are in a really tough spot.
Yeah.
They've got to decide between Aaron Rodgers, who could be amazing,
Yeah.
but is also unpredictable,
Right.
or Russell Wilson, who's more of a known quantity,
Yeah.
but maybe not quite at that same level.
Right.
And there are different opinions within the organization about which way to go.
Right.
So it's a really fascinating situation.
And here's a final thought for you.
Okay.
What happens to the entire AFC North if the Steelers get either Rodgers or Wilson?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I mean, how much does that change the balance of power
Yeah.
in that already super tough division?
Right.
Think about how different those two quarterbacks are and the challenges they would present to the other teams.
Yeah.
So that's something to really think about.
It's going to be an interesting offseason.
It is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.